Hello guys, we've been talking about selection, especially single trait selection in the previous videos. Today I want to be talking to you about multiple traits selection. Practically speaking, animals have multiple traits, and sometimes we are interested in selecting an animal not just because of one trait, but a group of traits. So today we want to look at how this can be done. How can I select an animal for 2 or 3 or more traits at the same time? That's what this class is all about. So sit down and just relax. The first way to do multiple trait selection, we have a method called Tandem. Tandem method. In tandem methods, the breeder or the farmer selects the animals based on one trait at a time. What that means is that he picks a trait of interest out of the many traits he wants to improve and selects those animals that bear that trait, keeps selecting them from one generation to another, until a point when he is satisfied that improvement has been achieved, or if he has achieved his set mark, then he can now relax selection on this trait and go to another trait and begin selecting again. For that trait, he selects for several generations until he achieves gain or he achieves his mark. Then he relaxes trait 2 and goes to trait 3 and continues to select again. Let's just be practical with examples. Let us say in my chickens, I want to select for egg size, I want to select for egg number, and I want to select for resistance to a disease. All right. So the first thing the farmer is interested in improving, or the breeder, is the size of the eggs. So he starts selecting among the population of hens that he has for those that are laying sizable eggs. Maybe the eggs that weigh from 50 grams and above. So all those chickens or hens that lay whose eggs are less than 50 grams, he discards them. So he selects only those that lay eggs that are 50 grams upwards for breeding. So they are the only ones he breeds. He breeds to produce parents or to produce offspring for the next generation. So when he does this for the first generation, second generation, third generation, as the case may be, when he has gotten to a point that all the chickens or that trait has been fixed, or he has gotten to a point that he feels he has achieved sufficient improvement on egg size, then he goes to his goal number 2, which was about egg number or quantity of eggs. So among those birds that he has on ground now, or he has improved for egg size, he goes inside of them and begins to select those that are laying more eggs. So you have achieved egg size, but now he's interested in number of eggs. So he's going to select those that lay 20 eggs, 30 eggs in a certain period of time, and discard those that lay less, maybe 15 or 20 or below. So he will select for number of eggs continuously. When he is now satisfied, then he will now go on to start selecting for birds or hens that are resistant to a prevalent or an important disease in that environment. So you will agree with me that this tandem selection that seeks to improve one trait at a time, as good as it is, it can be laborious. It is time consuming, because you have to wait generations upon generation. So it takes time, it is laborious, it is costly. And another thing is that, practically speaking, this method, tandem selection, only works well if the traits of interest are in correlation. They are positively correlated. For example, if trait 1 is positively correlated with trait 2, it means that if I am selecting for trait 2, I will still be bringing about improvement on trait 1, since they are moving in the same direction. But if the correlation is positive, but however it is low, even though I'm selecting for trait 2, I'll be making only a marginal improvement in trait 1. But the worst case, or the nightmare of the farmer or the breeder, could be if the traits are negatively correlated. Wow, that would not be a good place to be as a breeder using tandem method of selection. That is because selection for the second trait or improvement sought for the second trait will be countering the improvement that has been painstakingly acquired or achieved on the first trait. So that is one major disadvantage of tandem selection. If the traits are negatively correlated, then gain that was made after many years of improvement on one trait can easily be cancelled by a second trait which is negatively correlated with the first. So I hope you get the concept of tandem selection. You select one trait at a time, achieve appreciable or desirable improvement, then you relax and go to a second trait in tandem, just as the name goes, in tandem, step by step. The next method of selection for multiple traits is called independent culling level. Independent culling level. So, in independent culling, you set independent targets for all the multiple traits you want to improve all at a time. You set the threshold, as it were, the cutoff mark. What that is like the minimum acceptable performance level for each of the traits. So let us say you have 3 traits. You have trait A, it may be weight. You have trait B, which may be milk production. You have trait C, which may be resistant to a particular disease. So you set some marks. You set some mark. Let us use numerical marks. Maybe for this trait, you say this trait ranges from maybe 10 down to 1. Maybe your cutoff mark here may be 3 for this trait. For this trait, maybe because it's important to you, the threshold may be 6. This trait, maybe it's not that important to you, the threshold, the independent culling level may be 1. So what you are saying is that each of the animal you are going to pick must meet this minimum requirement, this minimum threshold, this minimum culling level. So if an animal meets this level of 3 for this trait, and meets this minimum level of 6 for this trait, and meets this minimum level of 1 for this trait, that animal is picked, is selected. However, if another animal meets this level, 3, maybe it scores 5, it meets this level, but here it scores 0, you are going to drop that animal. Even though it has met trait A, the cutoff for trait A, it has met the independent culling level for trait B, but because it has failed for trait C, you will discard it. So in independent culling level, irrespective of the number of traits, the breeder or the farmer will set a minimum desirable level, a minimum acceptable level for all the traits. And when he does that, he is going to run through the trait. An animal to be selected must pass all the traits. It must meet all the minimum requirement, the minimum culling level for each of the traits independently. That is why it is called independent. So each animal must meet the independent culling level for each trait to be selected. If an animal does not meet for just one trait, that animal will be discarded. That animal will not be selected for. So the major disadvantage of independent culling level is that an animal that is excellent in many of the traits but fails in one will be discarded. So there will be no room for such an animal. So that is one major disadvantage of independent culling level. However, its advantage is that it is faster than tandem selection, because you're going to be selecting for all these traits just at a go, rather than this in tandem selection that you waited for improvement, generations upon generation for one trait before you move to the next trait. No, in this case, all your multiple traits, all your traits of interest, you can just set an independent culling level for them and select for them all at once. Lastly, we have selection index. In selection index, all your traits of interest if they are compounded, you make a composite, you come about with an index, a single measure for all the traits that you are interested in. A simple example I will give you maybe is your CGPA, your cumulative gross points average. What is used to assess you in your university, in your undergraduate, in your class. This CGPA is a form of selection index. The student has many courses. You have several courses you are offering. Let us say you have 4 courses you are offering. You have biology, you have physics, you have chemistry, and you have nature science or whatever. If, for example, a student is in life sciences, they're going to be interested in biology, chemistry, and nature science. So some weights will be attached. This weight is what you call credit unit in your own courses. So since you are an animal science student or a biology student, they are going to attach maybe 4 credit units here. You are not a physical science student, so but somehow you need this knowledge, so they are going to make this one a 1 credit load course. This one could be 3 credit units. This one could be also 4 credit units. So at the end of the day, these weights will be used as coefficient to be multiplied with your score in this course. So if these are traits in an animal, this trait, if the animal scores, let us say 50 in this trait, here you are going to say 4 times 50. That will be the entry of the animal for this course, for this trait. Then here, let us say the animal scores 70 for this trait. Is going to be 1 times 70. Here is going to be 3 times the score of the animal. Let us say this animal scores 60. Here is going to be 4 times the score of the animal, or your score in this course. Let us say here you scored only 40. Then at the end of the day, you have this is 200, then you have this 70, you have this 180, you have this 160, then you're going to add all of this. What you get here is the index. That's the index. So if the index, or your index added here, for example, is 500, and the index of another person is 600, haven't computed it like this, this person will be selected because he has a higher index than you. So in index selection, the traits of interest are put together, they are pooled into a single measure called the selection index. It is that index that is the basis for selecting one animal or for rejecting one animal. However, in that index, the traits do not contribute equally. The contribution of the trait is determined by the farmer according to the importance, the economic importance of the trait. So if milk production is important to the animal, to the farmer will attach a greater coefficient, a greater weighting measure on that. If color of skin is less important to the farmer, then the farmer is going to attach a lower credit unit or a lower index or a lower weight on that color, because in this dairy industry, color is immaterial. However, if you turn the table around and this is show business, then color or skin type or fur may be important. Therefore, in a show business where cattle or dogs are to be taken out for show, the color may be important. Therefore, you will quickly change the index, you will quickly change the weight attached to color into a higher one. And the production of milk may not be that important in the show animal. Then you may come and adjust the weight that is attached to milk production because of the purpose, in this case being show business. So these are the 3 methods that can be used when you want to select for multiple traits. Remember the other methods such as family selection, individual selection, and what have you. Those ones, they are basically for single traits. But if you are interested in selecting for multiple traits at once, then you use this trait, this method of selection, that is tandem selection. Do not forget, one trait improved at a time. After that, you relax your effort on that and move to the next trait. Or independent culling level, you set a minimum benchmark or threshold for all the traits. An animal is expected to meet all of the threshold before the animal is selected. The animal will be rejected even if it has met 99% of the trait but has failed in one. However, in index selection, you pool all the traits together into one single measure called the index. In doing that, you attach weight according to your desires. So if a trait that is of interest to you, you attach a greater weight. That weight is like a coefficient, it's like a multiplier that gives you your satisfaction, what you desire to be the input of that trait in that index. The other traits that are of low importance to you, they get to have smaller weights attached to them. The major advantage of selection index, by the way, selection index is about the most powerful. It's more powerful compared to these other two. It is far more important than tandem and independent selection. That is because in selection index, you determine the exact contribution of the trait of interest. And in selection index, animals that perform poorly in certain traits that are not very important, they still get to be selected because they perform marginally poorly in some traits. But because it's an index, if you pull their overall performance together, they still get to be selected. In that case, selection index supersedes independent culling. In independent culling, an animal could be rejected just because of one trait, even though it has done excessively well in certain traits. I hope that you have understood this concept so far, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Stay tuned, subscribe, like, and share. See you.